Hey y'all, it is Thursday, April the 30th, the last day of April, which is unbelievable. And we are going to go ahead and review Chapter 13 quiz that you have from yesterday. Today is also Zoom day, so remember at 11 o'clock a.m., be on the lookout for your invitation. That should be in your email, and go to the link and we will chat. I will probably still do the thing that we did last week where at the end of our discussion I'll leave and let you guys just talk for a few minutes so that you can catch up. I know sometimes it's hard to create your own Zoom, so hopefully that allows you some of that time to talk with your peers and check in on everybody. So, see you on Zoom in just a little bit. As for today's lesson, let's go ahead and review Wednesday's Chapter 14 Comprehension. It's 8 questions. My answers are scanned and uploaded, but you can see them here. I'll hold them up real quick. For the 29th, looks like that. But go to the answer tab on my website so that you can see it more clearly if you need to review it again, but I'm going to go over the answers now. Question 1. The first person Maddie loved was D, Kira, and that answer is found on page 120. So 1 is D. Question number 2. Maddie had told Seer no one would marry Kira because of her C, gimpy leg. Remember, she has that handicap leg, and he was saying that it was a miracle that they didn't send her to the beasts back in their original village, because that's what they typically did. But Kira had many talents, and she actually held a really prestigious position in that community. So number 2 is C, and that answer is found on page 122. Question number 3. They didn't send Kira to the beast because she grows flowers for B, dyes. Number 3 is B, and that answer is found on page 123. Question number 4. It had been 2 years. Answer to number 4 is A, 2 years since Maddie had seen Kira. And that's page 123 where you can find that answer. Question 5. Maddie wished he knew the names of the flowers so that he could tell Jean. So 5 is B, and that answer is found on page 125. Remember, Jean gave him that kiss before he left, and she loves to garden, and she's known for it, so he was like, oh man, I wish I knew all these flowers' names so I could really impress her. But he didn't. Question 6. While at the cottage, Maddie thinks how much easier it would be to travel if he, B, healed Kira. Remember, the goal in this chapter was for him to go get Kira and bring her back to village, but he's thinking this is going to be a really long trip because she has this leg that makes it hard to travel because she uses a crutch. So he's like, maybe if I use my powers to heal her leg, this trip will be a little easier. But we don't know if he's going to do that yet. Maybe we'll find out today. Question number 7. While Maddie took a nap, Kira worked C in the garden. So 7 is C, and that can be found on page 129. And then question number 8. Maddie quietly fell asleep, B, on the couch at Kira's house. She's going to work in the garden. His dog Frolic is falling asleep on some of her sewing materials, and he is falling asleep on the couch. Page 130. I have my monitor up here to check on the girls. Sorry, that was... So if you see me peering over there, it's to see if they've woken up yet. Alright, so that is the review of Chapter 13. Remember that you can go back and see the scanned quiz through the Answers tab on the website, just like all the other activities that we work through in this digital learning extravaganza. So, here you'll turn the page to get your Chapter 14 quiz, which we will do at the end of the reading of this chapter. This one's kind of another long one, like 13, so I'm expecting this to be about a 20-ish minute video. But as you know, I marked the times that we are starting the reading at the bottom so that if you need to rewind, fast forward, whatever, you can do that. So we're going to start the reading for chapter 14 at 5 minutes and 30 seconds, if you can see it at the bottom of this screen. Okay, so flip in your book to chapter 14. All right, chapter 14. To his amazement, Kira said no. Not no to leaving, he hadn't suggested that to her, not yet, but a definite, unarguable no to the idea of a straightened whole leg. So he pitched it to her like, hey, I can help you, I can fix your leg, and she says no. This is who I am, Maddie, she said. This is who I have always been. She looked at him fondly, but her voice was firm. It was evening, the fire glowed in the fireplace, and she had lit the oil lamps. Maddie wished that the blind man were in the room with them, playing his instrument, because the soft, intricate chords always brought a peace to their evenings together, and he wanted Kira to hear the music, to feel the comfort it brought. He had not yet told her that she was to return with him. During their supper together, as Kira chattered about the changes in Old Village, how much better things were now, he had only half listened. In his mind, he had been weighing what to tell her, when, and how. So she's talking and talking, and he's like, just can't stop thinking about how he's going to tell her that she's supposed to go back with him. There was so little time and he needed, Maddie knew, to present it to her in a decisive but convincing way. So he's like, I need to really get her on board with this, and quick, because we don't have much time. Suddenly, he heard her make a casual comment about her handicap. She was describing a small tapestry she had embroidered as a wedding gift for her friend Thomas, the woodcarver who had recently been married. So Thomas got married. It was all finished and rolled up, and I had decorated it with flowers, she said. And on the morning of the wedding I set it out, carrying it, but it had rained, and the path was wet, and I slipped and dropped the tapestry right into a mud puddle. Kira laughed. Luckily, it was still early, so I came back here and was able to clean it. No one ever knew. My leg and stick are a nuisance when it's wet outdoors, she said. My stick has never learned to navigate mud. She reached over to the pot and began to pour more tea into their mugs. Surprising himself, he blurted out, I can fix your leg. The room fell completely silent except for the hiss and cackle of the fire. Kira stared at Maddie. I can, he said after a moment. I have a gift. Your father says that you do too, so you'll understand. I do, Kira agreed. I always have, but my gift doesn't fix twisted things. I know, your father told me yours is different. Kira looked down at her hands, wrapped around her mug of tea. She opened her fingers, spread her hands out on the table, and turned them over. Maddie could see the slender palms and the strong fingers, calloused at the tips from the garden work, the loom, and the needles that she used for her complicated, beautiful tapestries. Mine is in my hands, she said softly. It happens when I make things. My hands. He knew he shouldn't interrupt, but his time was so short, so he cut her off and apologized for it. Kira, I want you to tell me all about your gift, but later. Right now there are important things to decide. I'm going to show you something, he told her. Watch this. My gift is in my hands, too. He had not planned this, but it seemed necessary. On the table lay the sharp knife which she had sliced the bread for their supper. Maddie picked it up. He leaned down and pulled the left leg of his trousers up. Kira watched, her eyes confused. Quickly, without flinching, he punctured his own knee. Dark red blood trickled in a thin, crooked line down his lower leg. So to prove his power to her, he just cut his own leg with a knife. Oh, Kira gasped. She stared at him and held her hand to her mouth. What? Maddie swallowed, took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and placed both of his hands on his wounded knee. He felt it coming. He felt his veins begin to pulsate, then the vibration coursed through him, and he felt the power leave his hands and enter his wound. It lasted no more than a few seconds and ended. He blinked and took his hands away. They were smeared slightly with blood. The trickled line on his leg had already begun to dry there. Maddie, whatever are you? When he gestured, Kira leaned forward and looked carefully at his knee. After a moment, she reached for the woven napkin on the table, dipped it in her tea, and wiped his leg with a damp cloth. The line of blood disappeared. His knee was smooth, unembellished, and there was no wound at all. She looked intently at it, then bit her lip, reached out, and pulled the hem of his trouser leg down over his knee. "I see." That was all she said. Matty shook himself free of the wave of fatigue it had caused. Remember, it makes him really tired when he uses that power. "It was a very small wound," he explained. "I just did it to show you that I could. It didn't take much out of me, but I've done it with bigger things, Kira, with other creatures with much larger wounds." "Humans?" "Not yet, but I can do it. I can feel it, Kira, with a gift, you know." She nodded. "Yes, that's true." She glanced at her own hands resting there on the table, still holding the damp cloth. "Kira, your leg will take a great deal out of me. I'll have to sleep after, maybe for a whole day or even longer, and I don't have much time." She looked at him quizzically. "Time for what?" "I'll explain, but for now I think we should start. If I do it right away, I can sleep completely through the night and almost all the morning. You can use that time to become accustomed to being whole." "I am whole," she said defiantly. "I'm into having 2 strong legs. You'd be amazed at how it feels and how much more easily you can move around, but it will take a little time to adjust to it." She stared at him. She looked down at her twisted leg. "Why don't you lie down over there on the couch and I'll pull this chair over and sit beside you?" Matty began kneading his hands in preparation, so he's getting ready. He took several deep breaths and felt energized. He could tell that his full strength was back. The knee wound had been such a small thing, really. He rose, lifted his wooden chair, and moved it over beside the couch where he napped that afternoon. He arranged the cushions so that she would be comfortable. Behind him, he heard Kira rise from the chair as well, lift her stick from where it had leaned against the table, and walked across the room. To his surprise, when he turned, he saw that she had taken the mugs to the sink and was beginning to wash them, as if it were an ordinary evening. "Kira?" She looked over at him. She frowned slightly, then she said no. There was no arguing with her, none at all. After a while, Matty gave up the attempt. Finally, he moved his chair again so that he could sit in front of the fire. It was chilly in the evenings now, with summer ending. Forrest had been downright cold at night, and he had woken in the mornings during his journey, aching and chilled. It was comforting to sit by the warm fire now. Kira picked up a small wooden frame with a half-finished piece of embroidery stretched taut across it. She brought it to her chair and moved a basket filled with bright threads to the floor beside her. Then she leaned her stick against the fireplace wall and sat down and picked up the needle that was waiting, threaded with green attached to the fabric. Sorry, y'all. Sorry. "I will go with you," she said quite suddenly in her soft voice, "but I will go as I am, with my leg and with my stick." Geez, at this rate, it might take me 5 hours to read this chapter. I have a tickle. Excuse me. So she's saying that she'll go, but she's going as she is. She's not going to fix her leg or do whatever. Matty, puzzled, stared at her. How had she known before he had asked it what he was planning to ask her? He hadn't even brought it up yet. "I was going to explain," he said after a long moment. "I was going to persuade you how—" "I started to tell you earlier," she said, "about my gift. What my hands do. Move your chair closer and I'll show you now." He did so, pulling the crude wooden chair near where she was. She tilted the embroidery frame so that he could see. Like the colorful tapestry on the wall of the blind man's house, this was a landscape. The stitches were tiny and complicated, in each section a subtle variation in color so that deep green moved gradually into a slightly lighter shade, and then again lighter, until the edge was a pale yellow. The colors combined to form an exquisite pattern of trees, with the tiniest of individual leaves outlined in countless numbers. "It's forest," Matty said, recognizing it. Kira nodded. "Look beyond it," she said, and extended her finger to point to a section in the upper right, where forest opened and tiny houses were patterned along curved paths. Page 138. He thought he could almost make out the house that he shared with the blind man, though it was infinitely small on the fabric. "Village," he said, exclaiming in awe with meticulousness of her craft. I embroider this scene again and again, Kira said, and sometimes, not always, my hands begin to move in ways I don't understand. The threads seem to take on a power of their own. He leaned closer to look more carefully at the embroidery. It was astounding, the detail of it, how tiny it was. "Maddie," she said, "I've never done this with anyone watching, but I can feel it in my hands right now. Watch." He peered intently as her right hand picked up the needle threaded with green. She inserted it into the fabric at an unfinished place near the edge of forest. Suddenly, both of her hands began to vibrate slightly. They shimmered. He had seen this once before on the day that Leader stood at the window, gathered himself, and saw beyond. He looked up at her face and saw that her eyes were closed, but her hands were moving very quickly now. They reached into the basket again and again, changed threads in a motion so fast he could barely follow it, and the needle entered the cloth and entered the cloth and entered the cloth. Time seemed to stop. The fire continued to crackle and sputter. Frolic sighed in his sleep at the edge of the hearth. Maddie sat speechless, watching the shimmering hands dart. Hours and days and weeks seemed to go by, yet oddly, only a blink, an instant of time passed. Today and tomorrow and yesterday were all spun together and held in those hands that moved and moved and moved. Yet her eyes were closed and the fire still flickered and the dog still slept. Then it ended. Kira opened her eyes, sat up straighter, and stretched her shoulders. "It tires me," she explained, though he already knew it. "Look now," she said, quickly because it will fade. He leaned forward and saw what now, in the embroidered scene at the bottom, 2 tiny people were entering the forest. He recognized one as himself, backpack on his back. He could even see, amazingly, the torn place on the sleeve of his jacket. Behind him, meticulously stitched in shades of brown, was Frolic, his tail high. And beside Frolic he saw Kira, her blue dress, her stick wedged under her arm, and her dark hair tied back. The top edge of the embroidery had changed as well. Now beside the house he had recognized as his, he could see the blind man standing. His posture was that of someone waiting for something. And suddenly, Maddie could see, too, crowds of people at the edge of village, page 140. They were dragging huge logs. Someone, it looked like Mentor, who was giving directions. They were preparing to build a wall. Maddie sat back. He blinked, astounded, then leaned forward to look at it again. He realized he wanted to search the scene for a glimpse of Jean, but now the details were gone. He could still see colored stitches, but it was simple, exquisitely beautiful but simple, landscape again. For a moment he saw the people, flat now with no detail, but then they faded abruptly and were gone. Kira set the embroidery frame down on the floor and rose from her chair. "We must leave in the morning," she said. "I'll prepare the food." Maddie was still stunned by what he had just seen. "I don't understand," he said. "Do you understand what happened when you stabbed your knee with that knife and then closed and cured the wound with your hands?" "No," he admitted, "I don't. It's my gift, that's all." "Well," Kira said matter-of-factly, "this is mine. My hands can create a picture of the future. Yesterday morning I held that same fabric and saw you come out of forest. In the afternoon I opened the door and there you were." She chuckled. "I hadn't seen Frolic, though. He was a nice surprise." The dog awoke and looked up at the sound of his name. He came to her to be patted. "While you napped," she went on, "I stitched again and saw Father waiting for me. That was just this afternoon. Now they have started to move logs into place for the wall. And did you notice the change in forest, Maddie?" He shook his head. "I was looking at the people. Forest is thickening, so we must hurry, Maddie." Odd. It was the same thing that Leader had seen. "Kira?" Maddie asked. "Yes." She was taking food from a cupboard. "Did you see a young man with blue eyes, about your age? We call him Leader." She stood still for a moment, thinking. A strand of dark hair fell across her face and she brushed it back with her hand. Then she shook her head. "No," she said, "but I felt him." Okay, so all these books are really coming together now. because we're about to connect Kira with Jonas and Maddie. So all three books are coming together. That is the end of chapter 14. So now at 20 minutes and 30 seconds, I'm going to begin reading the chapter 4 quiz. Okay? So if you need to pause, rewind, listen to anything else again, go for it. But here we are. This is the chapter 14 quiz. We'll begin now. Chapter 14. Question 1. Kira dropped the gift she made for Thomas, A, on the floor, B, into the bushes, C, in the mud, or D, in the water. So remember, Kira's on the way to Thomas's wedding, and she dropped the gift that he made for him where? A, on the floor, B, into the bushes, C, in the mud, or D, in the water. Question number 2. Kira's gift was to blank with her hands. Is her gift to A, make things with her hands, B, write backwards, C, paint, or D, carve things? Question number 3. Kira does not want to be healed because she already feels A, happy, B, whole, C, loved, or D, handicapped. Remember, Maddie says, I can fix you, I can make your leg all better, and she says, no, I don't need to be healed because I already feel what? Question 4. On Kira's embroidery frame, she had stitched A, Maddie, B, her house, C, frolic, or D, forest and village. Question 5. Part of Kira's gift is to embroider A, flowers, B, the future, C, mittens, or D, scarves. Question number 6. Maddie sees them building a blank around village. So in this picture that Kira's created, what does he see them building around village? A, a trade center, B, a wall around, C, a castle inside, or D, a jail? Question number 7. Kira says they will leave. So remember, she agrees that she is going to go with Maddie, but when are they going to leave? A, in the morning, B, after dinner, C, at night, or D, next week. And finally, question number 8. Kira had not seen Leader, but had A, talked to him, B, felt him, C, written to him, or D, waved at him. Okay, so that is your comprehension review for chapter 14. Sorry that the video for today is kind of long. We're coming up on 24 minutes, but that was the review of chapter 13, the reading of chapter 14, and then comprehension activity for 14. So we are all caught up, ready to go into Friday, and I will see you on Zoom at 11. All right? Love you guys.